All right, let's hit it. Obviously, there's 3 players here, so we want to get your perspective. Todd Father, owners meetings, Florida, right now. Lots of news coming out of there. One article from Evan Drellick, who really is like hired to cover these kind of stories, is how there's a lot of debate about how they want to handle a salary cap push in the next collective bargaining agreement. They're debating the push at the summit. And to summarize, they all, of course, want it. The main reason is for cost control, so they can kind of push down salaries, make their team valuations larger and their profits larger. These are obvious business decisions. Nobody's disputing that part. But the debate is, how much do they want to push? Because some owners seem to be okay with missing a good chunk of time, and others are probably concerned about how that would affect the sport short and long term.
I mean, if this ever was to happen, which it never will or should, baseball would be in a lot of trouble. This is why other players from other major sports are jealous of baseball, because because I played in it, we don't have a salary cap. And I think that's the biggest part. Like, you can go ahead and sign a guy for $700+ million and give him 40 something or 50 something million a year. It comes up a lot. And I think Manfred and his team are trying to figure something out. They're like, oh, well, look at the Dodgers, see what they did. Well, guess what? That's their choice. They can go over the tax threshold. Any team can do it. They talk about small market teams. All these owners are billionaires. They can go out and buy a big name if they wanted to. This will never happen, nor should it happen. This is why it's a great sport, and they can make as much money as possible. That sounds greedy, but it's not. This is the way baseball is and the way the world is. Other sports are making millions as well, but the salary cap, you could keep bringing that up, and Tony Clark's going to keep denying it, and he should.
Let's stop talking about this. Let's stop talking about it as owners. Let's start talking about how can we all be competitive. We don't need parity. Like, why does the parity thing have to happen? Like, you all put your best foot forward, do the best you can to be competitive, not equal, competitive. Like, no other business that they own would they sit there and go, you know what? My business is really successful, but yours isn't as successful. Here, I'll give you some extra money so that yours is almost as successful as mine. Stop. It doesn't need to happen. This is a sport. Everybody needs to sit in that meeting and go, what are you going to do to make your team the best out there? Because when they do that, it's going to raise the tide for everybody's money. And now whatever you make, you're just going to all make a higher percentage.
AJ, you know what I want when this battle goes down? Because we know about the committee. There's like 6 owners that have been on it.
Open the books. Open the books.
Well, they're never going to do that. But here, can I offer this 100%. As a consolation prize from players when we bring them on during this fight in a couple of years? I just want to know what John Fisher has to say, like behind closed doors. Like, I want to know where his head's at, what he thinks about baseball. You know, maybe they give him a baseball IQ test and have him name 10 players in the sport. If he's going to be sitting in these meetings deciding the future of our sport, and there's the tweet from Bill Shakin, they have elevated him. He's gotten a promotion to the executive committee. So that committee, as far as I know, sits down and bargains stuff like salary caps. So he's going to be pushing that to the player committee in a couple years. And I mean, he might be, you know, the dumbest owner in modern history. Like, he does every single thing wrong. And it's not just the decision-making, but it's the process. It's the PR. He's botched everything and made our sport embarrassing. I mean, we have minor league baseball or a minor league field now taking control of a team for several years at least, right? It's embarrassing to everyone. That's the problem for me, AJ. So I'm just curious to see how this goes down. I hope somebody will just report from behind the scenes and tell me what's going on, because we've only heard him speak publicly a few times. It's super scripted and coordinated and maybe even programmed in his brain chip. So I'm just very curious to hear how this goes.
We'll see. We'll see. I mean, I don't even know what that does. I don't even know what the owner's executive committee does. Meet with the players?
Yes. Just like I think it's like the players subcommittee that goes against them in the.
I'm going to ask Kratz. Someone, I did a Barstool interview today with White Sox Dave, our guy. And they asked me if I was ever on a, committee or a player rep, and I was like, no, they never wanted me to do that kind of stuff. But I think Kratz, were you a player rep one year? Like I went to some negotiations. I went to negotiations, and when it was in Chicago, and they wanted players to show up, and I sat in some of those for a few hours and listened to it. And I got to hear a bunch when I was with the Twins, and they were trying to contract us. And Denny Hawking was a good buddy, and he was the player rep, and he was telling us all this stuff. And I mean, I don't know. You hear stories like, look at the player committee from this past year when they were talking about trying to get rid of Tony Clark and Bruce Meyer, right? And a lot of those guys got kicked off of it. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about it to know what these guys do, because even like the player, I know what the player executive committee is supposed to do. They're supposed to, the whatever 11 guys are supposed to make basically a decision for all the players. But I've never sat in one of those meetings, so I don't really know what happens.
Yeah, that's essentially it. You're gathering from your team as a rep. I was an alternate, so I was just there listening to guys gather their information or seeing the text threads. Hey, how do you guys feel about this? How do you guys feel about that? Some guys as reps did a good job. Some guys didn't.
Yeah, and the reason to me why someone like Fisher gets promoted is because he's a legend in that circle, because he's actually moving a team. And so he creates leverage, which is the key word, for every other team when they're asking their city and their taxpayers for money, right? So I want to leave everyone with this and just tell me which side you're on, okay? I got a quote from Drellick's story with the commissioner. He said he's talking about a lockout in a couple years, which obviously I don't want, and I think I'll speak for the fans. Most fans are not into that.
Didn't we just have a lockout? Didn't we just have a lockout?
Yeah, we did, but it didn't technically miss games. They just started like a few days later, whatever. So here, the commissioner's perspective, quote, in a bizarre way, it's actually a positive. There is leverage associated with an offseason lockout, and the process of collective bargaining under the NLRA works based on leverage. The great thing about off-season lockouts is the leverage that exists gets applied between the bargaining parties. Tony Clark with a response to this quote. Players know from firsthand experience that a lockout is neither routine nor positive. It's a weapon, plain and simple, implemented to pressure players and their families by taking away a player's ability to work. Simple question. Lockout, good or bad for a sport, any sport? Thumbs down, thumbs down, thumbs down. Okay, cool. That's it. I just want to like sometimes take us all back to common sense and what we think actually is legit.
Why would a lockout be good for any sport? You lose games, you lose interest from fans, you lose revenue for both sides. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, a strike and a lockout, I mean, I get their necessary evil sometimes, but it's not good for either side. And baseball's got it going right now. Like everything we look at, projections up, projections up. Remember, 94 was the last strike. How'd it work out? Everyone was like, oh, it's dying, it's dying, it's dying. Cal Ripken, the home run race of 98 kind of brought everyone back to it. But again, it kind of lost interest. Now everyone's starting to like come back. Everything's up. We don't want to break that momentum. Let's keep it going up. Figure it out, guys.
Yep. There you go. Some people watch the show and then comment later on about where my side lies. All I did was read a quote. That is a direct quote from both sides.